Thanks for joining me in episode 18. This is also day 18 and day 19. It's over a couple of days because the plastering, for some reason, they split over 2 days. It's not a big area that needs plastering. So this is called plastering, skimming. You may call it something else in America, but it's a multi-finish on top of the coat of plasterboards. So thank you for joining me in this episode. You're following along with the journey of my small studio build in my garden. Call it a garden office, call it a small house. It could be a number of things. Still haven't fully decided yet. Plans are changing as things go. What's going to be in this episode is basically how they skimmed and hang about, because I feel like they skimmed out here, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong. How it works is they basically skim over the plasterboard. There's a number of steps involved. You'll see here he's putting tape on the joints. It's like a special mesh tape, and it's designed for plasterboards. What happens is when the plasterboards join together, because obviously there will be joins as is a big wall, there will inevitably be gaps. What happens is they use this self-adhesive tape which sticks on the wall, and then they have this rich creamy plaster which actually skims over the top. Now, looking online, there's a few different variations of how this should be done. They say online that there should be 2 coats of plaster skimming on the plasterboards. Now, these guys did 1 thick coat and then they waited, and you'll see in this video clip it's time-lapsed, so how they managed to do this. There's 2 of them basically working on the ceiling, and the ceiling is quite intensive because it's like quite high up and you have to look up and your neck hurts after a little while. So you'll see they're putting a thick coat on. However, naturally the ceiling was quite good, so they put a good thick coat on the ceiling. But I found later on when they started doing the walls, I don't think they put as thick a coat on. I did mention this to the builders, so I'll explain the explanation they gave me. You can see I'm talking to him here now, but what's happening is they've always got a good excuse for everything they do, and it makes it sound like, oh, okay, there's a reason behind why they're doing it. But most of the time, cowboy builders will have an excuse behind most of the ways they're skimming on costs. So I feel like so in total they used about 7 bags of skimming plaster. That's 25 kilograms of plaster in each bag, and this is a 7 meter by 3 meter room. So all those guys out there, the builders that know off the top of their head when they look at a room how many bags it should take, is this the correct amount of plaster that has been used? Did they skimp out? Should they have been double? Should they have put a thicker coat on? The reason I say this is looking around as things were drying, I could see where the joins were. I know where the join is because there's a gap. More plaster goes into that gap, which means it takes longer to dry. So is it just the lines of wet plaster which is still yet to dry, because it could take up to a week to dry depending on the weather? Because if it's a warmer day, plaster will dry quicker. If it's a cooler day, it takes longer to dry. So is that the reason I'm saying this? Or is it that they've really put a thin coat on to skimp on using plaster? You'll find out in the description and in the pinned comment. I've put a link to the resources of this build project. I'm basically tracking how much they're spending on the equipment. I'm going to break down how much it costs, as well as other common questions for architects and builders if you're thinking about doing this type of build for yourself. You'll find that article useful. It's basically a blog post to accompany this video. So check that out in the pinned comments, and hopefully you find that useful. So you'll see now they're doing individual walls. One of the walls is longer than the other wall, so obviously it takes longer. So what they did do is they put a thick coat down. Well, I thought it was a thick coat. Looking at the plaster when it's wet, it always looks thick, but when they smooth it out, it feels like they're like finishing off. When it's wet, it looks shiny. So it looked like they were doing a decent coat, but then as it was drying, every day I was noticing that, I don't know, it just didn't look that thick to me. Should it be a thin layer, couple of millimeters at most, maybe 2 or 3 mil, I think is probably what they ended up with. However, in some spots, because the walls were that's another thing, walls shouldn't be uneven, should they? Because they built the walls, so the walls are straight. They use dabbing to put the plasterboard on the wall, and there's some spots which are taking longer to dry than others, so it's not an even coating, but they use these big trowels to make it all even. So you'll see now he's kind of going over the top of the skimming, waiting for like a half an hour, and then going over it again, but not actually putting more plaster on, just moving around the plaster that's on the wall, if that makes sense. It's like creaming a cake, letting it sit for a bit and then coming around when it's a bit more thicker cream, and then creaming around again. That's like 2 coats, but these guys just simply went through and coated one coat basically around there. So I don't know if that's how it should be, or if that makes sense. Is that the right way to do it? You can see the plaster is like slowly drying and it's kind of getting there, but overall it looks okay. I was also taking video clips on my phone to get slightly better quality of the video. So you'll see here's a few clips of while they were doing it. In the time lapse, it's kind of a bit rush, but this is how long it takes, like in normal speed of when they're skimming. And looking at it, it's like they're putting a layer on this, you know, pulling it along, and it seems like there's a nice thick layer. I did look at it from different angles as well, just to see how well it was there. You can see I'm kind of hanging about to see what's going on. So they're slowly pulling it. So it's like a thick coat that went on, and then slowly they were pulling out the marks, because when the first coat went on, it went a bit like, you know, mucky. And as they're finishing and pulling away, it's like slowly getting smoother. They leave it half an hour, and then they do it again and it gets smoother and smoother. So overall, it's not a bad finish, but that's what it looks like on camera. In real life, as it dries, I'm seeing lots of little different colored spots. Not spots, but when the paint goes on, I'll be able to tell. But it seems like it's even. This is the bag. Multi-finish is what they're using. And these are like the trowels they're using with the water, with the brush as well. And when they started doing the walls, you'll see they similar kind of situation. They started from a corner and they were pulling him along. And overall, it looked like it's like a nice finish. But is this necessary? Because I think some places they just put tape on the joints, and then they can just like filler the joints and then sand out the board and then just paint straight onto the card. Because it would probably take a little bit better than trying to paint freshly painted plaster. Freshly plastered plaster. So there's specific paint that you can use. Here's a couple of days later. This is the next day I looked at it, and you can see how it's like shrieking drying. I'm looking at it from different angles, like it's a bit dark spots, a bit of light spots, but I'm assuming as it dries out, it'll all get like a nice light, like what would you, nude type color, like a lighty pinky color. And Max has obviously come to do a quick inspection to have a look around and see things are going. And then this is just finishing off of that. So they were basically finishing off one side. So they did the ceiling and the two walls. And then this side of the wall did not have any windows in. So remember, small windows are going to go into here, and the door as well. So then they plastered on the following day. So actually it's more like 3 days. But I've put them, what I've started doing is I've put, because there's a similar thing going on, as builds progress, what you will notice is the builders jump between tasks, which makes me a bit worried. It's like they don't finish something off, but they start something else because they're running out of material, and then it's just things that are just a bit awkward. But I'm assuming builders do this on a regular, just to stay on top of what they're doing for whichever reason. It doesn't make sense to me, but obviously I've hired builders, so they're going to do it in their way. I've said in the past, I can't dictate to them, but yeah, you can dictate to them, but in a nice way. So here's the windows, double glazed windows, custom made to the fitting, and I was a bit shocked at how badly they fit the windows. I kept it in this episode because this all ties together. This side is going to be skimmed once these are in, and they basically put these on the windowsill, couple of whacked in a few screws, and that's it. Like no plugs, just straight into the brick. Well, that screwed into the windowsill, and then the whole window just screwed into the brick wall, but not in the brick, in the mortar. So again, they're not great at anything, but they're like, not what you call it, jack of all trades, master of none. So then they got these metal little corner bits, which were, in some cases they nailed it, in other cases they bonded it. I don't know why the difference is. I feel like they could have still nailed this, but in the door they use nails to hold this in place, but here they do it with bonding. So bonding is designed to bond two things together. This is what it looked like before the corners finished off, and before this you saw what it looked like. So I'm putting both clips in so you can see the difference it can make. And again, Max came another day, 3 days now. We're just inspecting around to see what's going on, how things are drying up, and the wall, the skimming, the plaster boards, everything's coming into place internally. Basically, once the skimming is done, there's not going to be much else left for them to do, apart from the ground needs a layer of screed, which is like a cement layer basically to give like a solid floor. We already have solid floor, but yeah. So now he's cutting bits out just to fill around the frame, and that's what's going to be skimmed. So this is the frame, as in the door frame. So the door frame they put temporarily in place because I don't want a plastic PVC door. I wanted a oak, like a solid wood door. And this is an internal door and an external door. The internal door will be for the shower area, the bathroom area, and the outside will be the main oak door. And again, here, it's like nothing this is like a big deal. You're putting door frame in, you kind of take your time and do it, but it's like they just jump from one task to the next. Everything's like a very, doesn't seem like it's planned. So for example, today, oh yeah, we'll do a bit of digging, or we'll do a bit of internal stuff. It's nice weather outside, why would you not complete the drainage? You'll see like they dug little bits up. That's going to be a separate episode about the drainage, because that's like part of the inspector checks certain spots of the build. So I'm keeping all the door, the skimming, the plastering in this episode, and the windows being fitted. But in another episode later on, you'll see more about that. So if you're not already following this series, I'm basically building a small home studio office house. I don't know what it's going to end up being, but it's going to be a lot of space. We're looking at 160 square feet, not meters. If it was meters, that'd be ginormous. 160 square feet of space, and that will be enough space to do pretty much anything really. I've seen smaller extensions being built, and pound for pound or for square foot, I'm going to give you a breakdown as well for prices, so stay tuned for that. So this is the oak wood frame. You see they've kind of, this is the internal frame. The one before this was oak. It's slightly reddy color, and they just screwed straight into the wall, leveled it out. They didn't spend. I think it's because they do this regularly. They're just botching stuff together, and I feel like it was more of a process. It would have been more of a process if I was doing it. Does that mean I would have taken longer on it? I think so. But would it have been a better job? Probably, or maybe. The door's solid. The door frame is solid. It's as level as it can be. Remember, this garden is slightly slanted, so they've built everything. This is another question. If you're a builder, if you're building in a slanted location, does your building follow the slant, or do you build square? Let me elaborate on what I mean there. So for example, if the building, like for example, if you look on our Google Maps of like our house, it's not a straight square house. It's like on a slanting road. So all the buildings are slightly off center. So like nothing's really 90 degrees. So in that example, if you were building two walls, would you follow that slight angle of building, or would you square the building, which then means you'll be away from the boundary and leave a bigger gap? And then that would also mean internally the doors won't quite be square. So yeah, that's a little bit like, some people say build square no matter where you are. Other people say, well, follow the slant of the building and then you're square based on the building. Does that make any sense? I think so. It makes sense in my mind. But with doors, they have hinges anyway, so they'll kind of be okay. But as things are progressing, you'll notice they also just, this is where they're putting the oak frame in. So the external frame. And they're just putting bits and bobs, like, wooden bobs to hold stuff in place, which won't be seen. But it's just a bit confusing to me why they wouldn't just get new wood to put in there. So it's like, this is where the botchiness comes into play, and they put a couple of screws. They did use plugs here because I specifically said I want the door to be strong, and they put 5 screws on each side because we can have hinges, and the door's quite a heavy door because it's a solid wood door as well. And yeah, it was square, it was strong, but just the process, it didn't feel professional. That's what I'm probably getting at. So they apparently have 20 years of experience, but nothing they've done so far, they've done in one go. Does that make sense? Like if I've been doing something for 20 years, I would be there and that frame would have been fitted where you could tell it was effortless for me to fit it because I've done it for 20 years. But the way they did it is like the first time they've come and they're like, they're a bit unsure about stuff. They're putting a screw in and they drill a hole, then they put the plug in, but they haven't drilled the plug hole at the right depth, so the plug goes further into the wall and then the screw is kind of spinning. Like these little amateur cowboy moves, which I find very, I don't know what the word would be. It's taking the mick, isn't it? It's like, you've been doing something for this long, yet you don't know how to screw a screw into a wall and do it in a way that gives you a good firm hold with a plug. What are you going on about? What are you doing? It's like some of these things I could 100% have done better than them. I know how to screw a button to a wall, and I know if I make a mistake, if the hole's too deep, because the plug will either go in too far or the screw won't hold in. If I'm making any sense at all, you're probably visualizing this in your mind, but you want the plug to open up in the hole to create a firm grip so it expands when it opens and the screw is going to be firm. So yeah, you get what I mean? Does that make sense? But they're capable of doing it because when they were doing the wall, they were pinning the walls into the existing building. They used plugs there, and they did that perfectly. So just maybe they're off days, or but if you're naturally good at something and you're doing it for that long, there's no way you can be bad at it, or is there? Yeah. What do you think? So far, if you've been following along, I have been making shorts about all the mistakes that I've been noticing, and those have been major mistakes, like deal breakers. But to be honest, it's good for me to see cowboy builders in process because then it makes me appreciate how much I know and how much I could do, but other people have not noticed. So some of the shorts I've asked what's wrong here, and people have not said what's wrong because they haven't seen what's actually wrong. They've said everything else apart from what is actually wrong. And it's like, I'm like, okay, am I maybe having too high of a standard for the builders? Should they be just getting on with it? And what they are doing is, let me tell you this, they're really crafty because they're making sure the bits that everybody else would see are perfect. So there's a good advert for them to show somebody else around. For example, one of the flashings on the outside of the wall, they did really well. They made the brickwork excellent. So everything you see is really good, but anything you don't see is not as good. Does that make sense? Like stuff that's hidden. Also, I said to him, I think you put a really thin coat of plaster on the first few walls. This time, I don't want to see the tape or the joints. So what he did was he went around first, just in the start of this time-lapse clip here, you would have seen it. He went over the tape with plaster and then they skimmed again. But the thing I was born yesterday, because when you're putting plaster on the wall, you can easily manipulate the big bits to like thin it out again. So I feel like they just did that to tick a box that, oh yeah, look, I'm putting an extra layer on. But really they just mushed it on the wall and then still put a thin coat on. Does that make sense? So they're trying to be clever, but it's not working because I'm seeing through a lot of the stuff they're doing. So it's very intriguing. It is frustrating, but it's just intriguing how the human brain works when people try and to save money. That's all they're doing, skimping on stuff. A couple of things where they've missed out boards behind other fascia boards because it would mean they would have to buy another board. So like all of these £5-6 are adding up. And if they're doing this on every single job, they're basically saving a lot of money. But overall, will I get a usable building? Yes, I will. Is it perfect? No, it's not. Has the inspector passed it? Yes, they have. So the question is, who is the bigger cowboy, the builder or the inspector that's passing it? Or the person who's paying for it to be done? Are we all just cowboys? I think that's what it's boiling down to. If you watched this far, well done. You are following through on this journey. Next time, there'll be more about the drainage episodes. So I'm going to give you more details about those as well as finishing off. So stay tuned for the next episode. And if you're not already subscribed, you can follow along with this journey. And I will see you on the next episode, which will be showing up on screen. In the pinned comment and in the description, you'll see information about notes for supporting this build, and you can check that out to help you in your journey. But I'll see you on the next episode.